Hmm. Hmm. Good morning, everybody. We are going to start in 2-3 minutes. Thank you to be here. Come va? Una sensazione di potenza. Okay, I just said 3 minutes, but I think that 1 minute is more than enough. Maybe we are all ready. Claudio, mi sa che dobbiamo spegnere la musica per la diretta. Fai tu, vuoi che parli io o parli tu adesso? Ma io dopo parlo. Okay. Welcome everybody. Thank you to be here. Thank you to all people that are watching the conference online. Here the conference, the final conference of Green Ethics. That is the final conference of this big project, Creative Europe Large Scale Cooperation. But it's not only the last conference, it's also the big final party of this big great project. Thanks to Alessandro Pontremoli and Alessandra Rossi-Ghiglioni to be here. Alessandro Pontremoli, professor at the University of Turin on Social Community Theatre, and Alessandra Rossi-Ghiglioni, director of Social Community Theatre and Spazio Bach, both founder of Social Community Theatre. Thank you for your welcoming. Sì, un applauso.
Good morning, everybody. Because my bad English, someone cleverer than me is going to translate. Few words. Sono Alessandro Pontremoli e sono, insieme ad Alessandra Rossi-Ghiglione, uno che cerca di cambiare il mondo.
I'm Alessandro Pontremoli, and with Alessandra Ghiglione I am one of those who is trying to change the world.
In questi anni abbiamo collaborato con il Centro di Teatro Sociale e di Comunità per creare delle situazioni di cambiamento attraverso la cultura.
In those years with the Social Community Theatre we collaborated as university in order to change the situation through culture.
Abbiamo incontrato tanti amici nel corso di questi anni che avevano lo stesso obiettivo: portare la cultura per portare il benessere e per portare la pace.
We met a lot of friends in those years who had the same goals, to use culture in order to create well-being and peace.
E quindi porto i saluti dell'Università di Torino, dei docenti che hanno collaborato con questo progetto e auguro a tutti una felice festa conclusiva del progetto.
So I'm saying my greetings from University of Turin, from all colleagues, and I wish everybody to end happily this Creative Europe project and party as well. So I had, as for my introduction, some notes. So I'll have them with me. So one thing I want to share in this introduction is how the world is changed since we began our project. We began 4 years ago, and really the world changed deeply. We are now facing many challenges. Of course, there is still the climate crisis that is at the core of our project, but more challenges are now in front of us. They were also before, but now they are in a different scale. We have a growth of inequality, we have a threat to democracy, and we have war, even in Europe. So, what in everything is changed in a way we couldn't imagine it would be like this. And what about culture then? We think that culture is in some way a minor, incidental activity in this world. Well, it is not. In my opinion, now culture is becoming even more important because it has the key asset, the key elements with which we could really resist to this situation and work for a better scenario, a scenario of peace, a scenario of equality, a scenario of solidarity. And why culture and why theater, specifically the kind of theater we share, a theater that belongs to the so-called socially engaged arts, so the kind of theater that wants to change something. The word is a big goal, but something is something we can achieve. So I think theater has this key asset, and the first one is it is able to connect people and create mutual understanding. Because through theater we can face-to-face, not in a digital, but in a lively way, meet one another, share ideas, share differences, handle conflicts, because conflicts are among us every day, but we can handle it with the theater. And we create a safe space, a safe situation in which people feel that they can meet each other and understand. And this is a key element of the future. And theater can do it much better than any other art because it's a lively art. And then in this way also culture and theater can, let's say, fight against some big issue of this time, that is isolation, mistrust, loss of hope, all elements that are affecting young generation, the mental health of younger generation, and of all of us. Then there is a second key aspect. I think that through theater we are training critical thinking, which is also something very important nowadays, because it's about how we achieve information, how we deal with information, how we are able to distinguish between what is reality, actual, and what is fake. And critical thinking is a key element for our ability to keep up with this kind of situation we are in. And then there is a third element that I think we really experienced in this Green Ethics project, that is theater is empowering activism. The kind of theater we share, the theater engaged in social impact, is not the theater of audiences, but it is a theater of active people, everyone is engaged in a way to be an actor on the scene of theater, but also on the scene of his own life and of the social life. So this is very important. Activism is one of the key elements of participation, and theater is very much connected to participation. And cultural participation, we know, is fostering well-being, is fostering social inclusion, is fostering connection. And then there is the last element, of my opinion, that is about imagination. It was a word we used in the 60s, and now we are going back to it. So what is strengthening imagination? It is about watching the present time and seeing in the present time the seeds of a possible future we want to build. It's about hope. There is no hope if there is not imagination. Imagination is the key element of arts and of theater as well. So the possibility to see something that is different, that is possible in many ways. And we need it to build a future we want to build now. So theater is a very precious European heritage also. Of course, it's not only in Europe, theater, but we have a strong European heritage about theater and social community theater. So we may call it in different ways in different countries, it doesn't matter. What we share is the idea that theater aims at having a social impact. It is an art, it's not less than an art, but it still, as an art, is engaged in having a social transformation. And social community theater is very effective because it is able to transform and activate citizens. And I really believe that's the key element of our future. And as inclusive and creative practice aiming at well-being, social community theater has been in Green Ethics a key element. And we shared it learning from each other. There is no a way to do it. There are many ways with many artistic approaches. And what we did as a partnership, and we are very happy with it, is to share, improve, and learn from each other. Because we feel it that this kind of theater is not only a common approach, but is a common value. And it is a common platform for change. So it's much more than technicality, methodologies, or practice. It's something at the heart of our choice of being artists, of being cultural people. So we feel that this great experience has changed us all, giving us further motivation and strength to face the new challenges that we are facing every day, but also maybe to face new cultural, creative projects together. So thank you to every one of you for what we did together, and let's go on.
Thank you to Alessandra Rossi Ghiglione and thank you to Alessandro Pontremoli. This morning, I'm Alberto Pagliarino, project manager of Green Ethics. This morning we'll divide in three different moments. I'm going to introduce you the project, the whole project, the concept, the experience, the output. And this conference, yeah, come preferisci, come, if you like this, yes. And we prepared this conference with Sant'Agata, Fondazione Sant'Agata, that thought all the concept of the morning with us. Thank you to Fondazione Sant'Agata to be here, that will lead one of the section of the morning. At the end of the morning, we'll have a quick play, or one of the outputs that we realize during the project. Now, I hope that this yes, it works. It works. Fantastic. Green Ethics, Green Experience Through Theatre Inspiring Community is a social community theatre project that involves 18 partners all around Europe from 12 countries. It's a very spread project with a very big partnership, and we liked it so much. And we won the Creative Europe Call Cooperation 2022. And the main topic of the project is, of course, the Green Deal and green transition in Europe, about sustainability. And we worked on two main goals that are aligned to the Creative Europe Call, that are the green shift of the cultural field and cultural green engagement of the audiences. To front off to these challenges, we created different output. On one end, we worked on a green shift of the cultural field, thinking about that organization that missed some specific protocols or guideline to be helped in this transition. Because 5 years ago, when we started to think to the project, studying the state of art on this topic, we analyzed the fact that a specific guideline for this kind of organization missed. And so we worked a lot, because we have a lot of different exchange experiences with Beat Theatre 2, Teatro Stabile di Torino, Piccolo di Milano. We had and we have a great experience of exchange with Theatre Green Book, that is an international experience about sustainability, but was 5 years ago. Now the timings are changed. But 5 years ago, something missed. So we worked, during the project, we worked on the creation of green protocols specific for a small scale and medium scale organization that operates in cultural and also in social field. We have also a fantastic cycling power theater kit. I'm going to speak about it in few minutes, but you can see, Marco, that you can play with more action. Yes. So you saw how much it works. And an applause for Marco. That yes. If you applause, he put more energy. And this is the cycling power theatre kit that is a best practice from Piedmont region, from Mulino d'Arte. I'm going to speak about it in a few minutes. And then we created a green theatre network in Europe. I think that you met Theo, that is our mascot. Theo the dog is specialized in the welcoming at the buffet. It's a great expert. It is also expert in the art of hypnotize people at the buffet to have some sweets. Anyway, the other main goal is the cultural green engagement of the audience. We are expert in social community theater, so we are artists that are expert in the audience engagement. Our main goal was how to involve people, enhancing critical thinking, but also creating emotional about the topic, and not emotional that are only anxiety about critical thinking, but also something that help people to be proactive. So we created some outputs, Green Ethics live game, Green Ethics board game, and of course the Cycle and Power Theater kit too, that involved also the audiences with a lot of enthusiasm. Here you can see the 5 main output that I already tell about. And here we are. The first is the Cycling Power Theater. The idea is to spread the best practice born here in Piemonte, used by Mulino ad Arte, that is a theater company that is part of the project as partner, that realize this tool to give power to music and lighting. Mulino ad Arte is the first company, theater company in Italy that lead a theater festival completely based on the cycling power theater. The original name is Teatro a Pedali. This idea affected us, and the idea was to spread the kit all around Europe. So we realized 10 kit for the 10 artistic partners that are partners of the project in 10 different countries. The pedal power kit is a tool, practical tool for the organization, because we used it for our performances, but each theater company will use it also for their own festival, etc. It was very effective also for the engagement of the audience, because people loved to cycling and create power. Not only kids, children, or young people, but also elderly, medium, like me, 50 years age old, etc. The second best practice was an interactive theater format that was developed here by Social Community Theater Center and Teatro Popolare Europeo in Turin. That was the idea to create a performance where the audience is protagonist of the performance in an interactive way. Here you can see one of the image of the performance, one of the performance developed by one of the partners, Studio 7 from Germany. And the idea is to have a performance where the audience is divided into different teams and play a game. On the stage there is a board game with 24, 25 or more squares, and each squares contain a different theatrical and scientific content about climate crisis. Rolling the dice, people, the two teams, can move from a square to another square, and each square can be of a different category. We have monologue that are narratives about real story of people that in everyday lives are living the climate crisis or are fronting off the climate crisis. And these squares are based on a real interview that we had in our local territory. Other categories are icons that are also narratives, but of extraordinary people all around Europe that made something extraordinary to front of the climate crisis. Then we have trivial or quiz and do you know that pass some information, counterintuitive information that challenge our common intuition about the world and about the topic of climate crisis. And then also postcard from the future, that are some vision that come from the future to us, telling us how is going the future based on our daily behavior also during the game. So if during the games something change, also the vision of future will change. And we have also wondering of living, that are some square that tells about something amazing about environmental issues or animals or vegetables, etc. All these squares, all these categories break some bias in different way in our mind about climate crisis. Here you can see some photos from some performance. The amazing thing was that we developed a format. We had 1 week of very intensive work with all artistic partners in Crete, sharing ideas, knowledge, artistic languages, and each partner personalized, starting from their own artistic languages and their own experience, the format. So at the end we have 10 completely different theater, social community theater production, but based on the same idea. And what touched me was that, Claudio, what happened? I'm out of light. Okay, thank you. But here I cannot read nothing. But anyway, what touched me was that each partner used different register in the same performance, comic, dramatic, and these different registers that never touched the anxiety, but always worked on the proactive involvement of the public, was very effective to my point of view. Here you can see the workshop with citizens. Thank you very much. And we involved 750 citizens, inhabitants from 10 European countries during our artistic production. Each artistic production was created starting from the work with 60 people for each country that participated to social community theater workshop. During the workshop, that was theatrical workshop, they shared their own feeling about climate crisis, not only the anxiety but also the experience, etc. And they told about these feelings, this knowledge, using artistic languages, dance, music, street art, theater, of course. And during the premiere of each partner, people came on the stage with us. So 5 of the 24 square of the game was took in charge by people directly, with, of course, the work of artistic professional. We involved in our artistic production, in our artistic social community theater process, high-level professional that worked with communities. Here in Turin, I have to thanks to municipality of Moncalieri here in Turin, because in particular Dispari Teatro social community theater in their production worked with an amazing group of citizens in Moncalieri, and was a very great experience for us. Here we have another output, that is the board and online game Spaces for Future, that you can see on your left. Later we will have a quick play to our game. I said that our performance is based on a board game, and so we transformed all our production in one board game. And we played with the board game with 1,200 groups, different groups, involving 30,000 citizens all around Europe. The performance was watched by 70,000 people, so we involve a lot of people during our project. We have also an online version, thanks to TUC, Technical University of Crete, and later Nectarius will introduce you how they developed the game. The concept of the game is very close to the concept of the performance. People are divided in 2, 3, or 4 different teams and can play to the game, and the idea is to take or lost CO2 emission. Win the team that lost a lot of CO2 emission, of course. Green protocol for management and cultural events. As I anticipated to you, we developed a protocol. We shared this protocol that was adopted by 110 organizations. For us, was a big goal. At the beginning, our goals was a 50 organization, but a lot of different organizations on local level asked it to us. I think that it was because it was very easy to be adopted because we thought it in a very simple graphic way, starting from the meeting with the organization directly. And then if you want to know more about green ethics, you can have the PDF photo book. And if you want to see the PDF photo books, it's very easy because you have the QR code on the wall on your left and on your back. So join it. But we have a few concrete version, stamped version, on printed version on this table if you just want to have a look directly. Of course, the idea was to create something that was effective, that impact really on the territories. Not just using art to speak about the topic, but pass to the people competencies, awareness, and information about daily behaviors, etc. And to be sure that our goal was enhanced, we had a very intensive evaluation by one of our scientific partner, University of Évora. That was very, very important because Évora evaluated, Marcello Coppi will introduce you all the evaluation, all the result, all the impact. A spoiler, it was a very good evaluation at the end with good goal. Okay, we reached it. And the idea was to have a middle evaluation and a hand project evaluation, also not only on the audience, but also internal to the team of the project, to the partnership, also to make some changes during the project to improve it. Here are some numbers that I already told you. In green ethics, we are experts of social community theater. Normally we work with communities, territories, with a particular attention to involve also disadvantaged people, people who are part of fragile categories because of social, economic, or individual conditions. So a good part of the audience, but also of the citizens involved in the workshops, was part of this kind of categories. Here you can see some percentage of the participation in this case. All these numbers are inside of the photo book. Here the partnership, as I said at the beginning of the conference, this is not only the last conference, but it's a big party of final of this big experience. So thanks to all of you to be part of this big adventure. We hope to go on with other adventure, developing the topic. We see all the partners here in Piedemonte. We have to thank also Teatro Popolare Europeo that added other action in the project, thanks to the project Arti Performative per la Comunità 2024 and 2026, thanks to the financing by Regione Piemonte region, the cultural sector. So thanks to Teatro Popolare Europeo, because thanks to this more activity, the project arrived also in some rural areas in Piemonte. So thank you. And here, if you want to have a look, there is our website, www.greenethics.eu. I hope that I said, okay, I said everything. Thank you very much. So, we can pass to the second session. So, I call session 2. Sorry. I introduced Marcelo Coppi, and at the end, I completely forgot him. Sorry. Marcelo Coppi for the University of Évora. I'm a little bit of emotion for the end of the project. Also, the project manager are emotional. Okay. You have everything. You can have here your command.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to present the project evaluation that we made and show some impact, some effectiveness that the project made in the partners and also in the society that we work with. So starting, in this presentation, I will briefly walk you through, because we are running out of time, I think. I don't know if you are correct. But it was going to be fast. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. It's 45 already. Yeah, it's going to be easy. So we're talking about the project evaluation, its main impacts and effectiveness, and key activities and areas for improvement, as always we do in evaluation. And of course, the overall conclusions about the project evaluation. So about the yes, yeah, I'll give this. Okay, walk through. Yeah, thank you. Let me start with the project evaluation framework. So basically, we evaluated the audience satisfaction and the partner satisfaction. So partner satisfaction, always using questionnaires and feedback. A lot of questionnaires. I think my partners are like, oh, I'm tired of answering questionnaires. But yeah, it's the way we can do this job. So partner satisfactions were evaluated by all those aspects, a lot of them. And audience satisfaction were evaluated by performances and board and online game, always with a pre-questionnaire and then a post-questionnaire. Okay, so overall, as Alberto told you, the results are very positive. So it shows that high level of satisfaction for the partners and for the audience as well. Moving to the impact of the Greenetics game, we can see that the participants, they reported increased knowledge about the sustainability, the topic of the project. They had a stronger consolidation of sustainable activities and greater motivation to apply ecological practices in their lives. So it proves that, or we have at least some indicators that the Greenetics game as a powerful educational and awareness raising tool. So it was really good for us as well. And connected with the game was the pedal-powered theater, as Alberto said as well. It's closely connected to the game, so they use it for the games. And the prototype proved to be very effective in engaging participants actively, while also simultaneously communicating sustainability messages and innovative and experimental way. So by combining these performances, the artistic performances with this physical participants with the pedal-powered theater, the outcomes increased awareness and responsible energy use and sustainable practices. Moving to the green practices and acquired knowledges about the green field. The results always indicated that the partners and the audience, it's not only contributed to awareness, sustainability awareness, but also for change of behaviors. So we saw this by the answers in the questionnaires. Other activities, of course, the main activities were the game, but also beyond these core activities, communication, dissemination, and artistic network played a key role. And all these publications that the Green Etchis project made, they highlighted both pedagogical and ethical impact of the project, as well as contributing to strengthening collaboration and networking among all the partners. So all of them, like they traveling around Europe, so it was a nice activity for everyone. Of course, always in evaluation, we not just evaluate what happened, but what did well, but also what we can improve. Actually, this is the main goal of the evaluation, to get better for future projects. So we have some room for improvement here that include time management, so some project activities. So also we have like some session plans optimizing participants' experience, sometimes not so well let's say like that. The energy management was some problem because, you know, we are in 12 different countries and not so easy to travel around Europe by train or by bus. So sometimes or most of the times we have to use steel airplanes. So it's not so, it's something that you can improve for future projects. And the logistics as well for the bikes, especially. They love the bikes, but we can improve how to assemble all the equipment. Okay. So overall, as Alberto said, to conclude, the project objectives were achieved. So learning and improvement, we have some lessons were learned for future projects. It was showed the positive effects and partner coordination by the team, the coordination team. They said that it was amazing. So the results highlight the importance of strengthening this team management, logistics, mechanism for public participation to ensure continuity of good practices and to amplify the social and the environment impact of future innovations. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope the next projects we are going together as well. Thank you.
Thank you to Marcelo Coppi. Now, the second session of the morning, the panel organized by Fondazione Sant'Agasas, sessione 2, Rising Public Awareness on Environmental Sustainability, European Perspective and Experiences. Andrea Porta, if you want to come here with me, and if you want to introduce all with George Anatoli, Luis Conan-Rowe, and Duna Viezzoli.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alberto. I think you can see it. Yes. Okay. Thank you, first of all, for having us here. Fondazione Sant'Agata is an organization, an NGO, working at the international level in the field of the economics of culture. So what you are doing, you did very well in practice and through artistic languages. We try to do it in the research and scientific field, having a management perspective, so understanding how to help organizations in this very difficult world. We have an area dedicated to just transition. In this area, we are working since 5 years, more or less, in the relation between culture and sustainable development, looking at two main directions. The first one is how cultural organizations are dealing with reducing their environmental impact. So they're adapting their activities, facing climate change. The other direction is the one we are mainly talking about in this panel, is how cultural organizations can lead the change in their communities and can help their communities facing climate change. which was exactly the objective of Green Ethics. That's why we are very happy to be here, and that's why we studied you in the last years. In these 45 minutes, we are going to briefly guide you in a journey. We start from the international level. We start from an organization which is doing it very well, we think. This organization is Culture for Climate Scotland. I think we can open the screen for Lewis Cohen-Rowe, which is Culture Shift Manager for Culture for Climate Scotland. And I thank Lewis for being here, and I want to ask him to briefly tell us what they do, and especially what they do on this topic. So what they do in helping cultural organizations raising awareness in climate change. So Lewis, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Greetings from Glasgow. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Yes, so my name's Lewis, and I work at a charity called Culture for Climate Scotland. We do pretty much what the name says. I've prepared a few slides, so I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Oh yeah, I can see it's come up. Great. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a bit about the work we do here in Scotland and share some lessons we've learned, which I think are hopefully useful for other people doing this work around Europe. So we are... Oh, my slide's changing. Yeah. We are an independent charity. We've been working for 15 years at the intersection of climate and arts and culture. There's three main areas to our work, which I think link quite closely to the areas that you've been talking about in your project. So we do what we call Climate into Arts, the Green Arts Programme, which is about making the arts and culture sector run in more sustainable ways, adapting to the impacts of climate change, and thinking about the practicalities of how we decarbonise the way that the arts sector works. We also do Arts into Climate work, which is the Culture Shift programme. That's the part that I'm really here to talk about, which is about the roles of arts and culture as part of work on climate change and environmental movements. And then we have this area of work on systemic change, which we call our strategy programme. So that's about trying to address the structures and the preconditions that enable or constrain the cultural sector to play a role on climate change. So that's working with municipalities, governments, funders, and trying to develop more support for culture-led work on climate change. I am an artist by background. I'm a musician. For a long time, I thought that as a creative, there wasn't really much that I could do about climate change. I saw it as a technical issue that I didn't really have the right skills to help with. But through my time basically working with and interacting with climate change experts, academics, researchers, people working on climate change, I found that the issues people were talking about were actually primarily not technical issues. There were things like the ones that I've got on the screen now. So feeling that people have a lack of agency, that people don't feel able to take action in their own lives on climate change, a lack of trust in climate change planning and decision making, a lack of hope in a positive future, which has come up already, lack of a shared vision for what we want to work towards, lack of understanding of how climate change works, but also a lack of understanding between different stakeholders. So people making decisions about climate change planning and policy, not really knowing how to get accurate information from communities about how their decisions affect them, a lack of communication and a lack of connection. So all the different organizations, individuals working separately on climate change, not being able to find each other and work together. And I would say that these issues are all cultural. These are social, cultural issues where the arts have a history of excelling in addressing issues like this in various ways. So I think this really demonstrates that addressing climate change is a cultural issue. I'm just sharing a couple of quotes here as well. So one comes from a UK-based organisation called Climate Outreach, who basically try and find the best ways to communicate about climate change. And they point out this thing that, yeah, just explaining the science wasn't enough to provoke action. There was something missing. And the author, Amitav Ghosh, you might have heard of this book, The Great Derangement, which is basically an accusation that the cultural sector was not doing enough to address or communicate about climate change. And he described the climate crisis as the crisis of the imagination. So that links back to that earlier point. So I think all this makes me think that working on climate change is an area where actually the cultural field, including theatre, has a lot to offer. In the projects I run, I try and mobilize the particular, I suppose, skills and capabilities of the cultural sector to do more. And I've just tried to summarize some of the roles that I think culture can have on this slide. So I think the top one is the one that people tend to think about the most often, that arts and culture can try and make the very technical and intangible questions around climate change more comprehensible and relevant. That's what we often think about. But there's so many other roles for culture as well. So I'm interested in how arts and culture can reach new people in new ways, reach the people who don't see themselves as having a role in climate change. Thinking about the power of imagination, how do we bring together positive visions for the future that we want to work towards? How do we create better spaces for discussion, consultation, empowerment, help communities actively participate in climate change planning and decision making, build consensus in communities? I think it's really important that climate change is not something that can be addressed on an individual level. So I'm interested in the role of particularly performing arts and arts that bring together lots of people in a shared space for creating communities that can act together rather than individually. Care and well-being. So I think this is also massively important, that when we're dealing with very traumatic issues around climate change, the arts give us a chance to give something back, to create caring spaces that allow us to confront these very difficult issues in a way that doesn't lead to further anxiety or even trauma. And then finally, the unexpected. I always like to include this. I think it's so important that working on climate change requires finding innovative solutions, doing things in different ways. And I'm interested in how, if you work with an artist, and I think we've all experienced this, you encounter the unexpected. You always get out things that you didn't plan from the start. And I think leaving space for that is really important. So I'm just now going to talk about two projects that I've run, which have tried to mobilize these skills of the arts and cultural sector in different ways to help improve work on climate change. So the first is this project called Climate Beacons, which was run while the COP26 climate talks were here in Scotland, in Glasgow. We worked with a network of 7 different locations around Scotland. These were all places where we felt that there was a risk of those locations being left out of the conversation at that moment, places where it felt like there wasn't other activity planned around COP26. Places where there were particular climate or environmental issues that were especially relevant to those places that we wanted to draw into the conversation more deeply. So we brought together 7 different partnerships, bringing together cultural organizations, environmental organizations, community organizations, to work together to run events, activities, discussions, creative work that helps bring people into the conversation around COP26, and crucially to link it to local issues that mattered in those places. So I think this project was really about addressing some of those issues that I mentioned on the earlier slide, this thing around lack of agency, people feeling like they didn't have a role in work on climate change, didn't feel like there was anything they could do, and this lack of connection, there being these different organizations that existed but weren't finding ways to work together. And we were able to, establish all sorts of new connections. A lot of those partnerships are still going today, they're still working together. We reached a huge number of people, but I think it wasn't just about reaching lots of people, it was about having those deep conversations, creating spaces to really participate in planning for the future of those areas. So thinking about some quite specific local issues around mining heritage, the temperate rainforests of Argyll, land use, all these very thorny issues which are kind of embedded within climate change. And I think some things I learned from this project were the importance of the right thing at the right time. So using that COP26 moment where there was an upsurge in interest, but using that to reach places that wouldn't participate otherwise. Thinking about which audiences we're best placed to reach. So how can arts and cultural organizations reach people who wouldn't participate in climate change conversations otherwise? Establishing those long-term connections. So I really don't want to run projects which go in, do something cool and then disappear. I'm very interested in how we can use those projects as a way to develop longer-term work. And then I think the national network was also important. So we established these 7 local partnerships, but they were all connected up. They could all share information with each other. We were able to use that national network to then speak to the Scottish government and other kind of big national players to try and influence the things they were doing. And that thinking about national influence has informed this second example that I want to talk about, which is a project called Sea Change, which is still going on at the moment. It's running until 2027. This is a project working with 2 coastal towns in Scotland, so Montrose and Buckie, and thinking about just transition planning for coastal communities. So I suppose like Italy, Scotland has a lot of coast. A lot of climate change issues here are connected to coastal change, how climate change is affecting coastal areas, how the transition away from fossil fuels is also affecting jobs and employment in coastal areas, and working with cultural methods to try and explore and address some of those issues. So we've got a town artist embedded in both locations. They're running events, activities, workshops with local residents across a year and a half, basically to understand what are the issues that people are facing, how do they see climate change, what are their concerns, what are the opportunities, and trying to develop a shared vision, a shared plan for how those 2 areas, which are facing very different but still climate-related issues, should respond to the problems they're facing, coming up with a vision, and also trying to improve communication between the grassroots communities living in those places and decision makers. So we're interested in how producing creative work, running creative sessions can help bridge gaps between people who are in policy and planning roles and members of the public, creating non-hierarchical spaces that allow shared planning, visioning, and decision making. So that project's not over yet, but a few things that are emerging from that we found very simple, straightforward creative activities can be in a very effective way of engaging with people who are put off by climate change topics, the people who think that they are not the ones to talk about climate change, who maybe feel alienated by climate change policy and planning. Those creative activities have provided a really important way in for example, people working in offshore oil and gas and how we bring those into the conversation. Also this thing about connecting to policy and decision making. So how can we run creative projects which are able to inform decisions being made by government, being responsive to the community. So we really went into this project with a very open-ended approach. We had the time with these artists and they're responding to what comes up in conversation with people. Not presupposing what residents are interested in, but listening to them and then designing activities based on what comes up in conversation. And then this idea of working across the level of a whole town. So how can we bring together all the stakeholders in one place, looking at the connections in that particular location to bring about change on a very local level. So what's changed in the work we've been doing? So these are only 2 projects. We've been doing all sorts of other things, but I think we can see there has been a very significant impact here in Scotland from doing this work. So we've seen how the roles of arts and culture and climate change are now written into lots of different Scottish government strategies, as well as Creative Scotland, who are the main arts funder here. We've also got 132 organisations who are reporting to us on their practical work on decarbonising their operations. And we can see that now 120 of those are telling us that they are actively using their programming to communicate, support and influence others around climate change. So the vast majority are now doing this communication work. And we're also seeing that not just at the cultural sector, but municipalities and also environmental organisations are coming to us seeking to work with artists and cultural organisations. So it does feel that through the work we've been doing, we've really shifted the conversation and changed how people see the role of arts and culture as something which actually is quite central to work on climate change. I'm going to finish up there, but I thought I'd just share a few resources that are available on our website. We have a thing called the Library of Creative Sustainability, a set of case studies about how arts and cultural methods have been brought into environmental projects to improve the things they do. We have reports on various projects, including that Climate Beacons one I talked about. We have an evaluation framework for understanding and communicating the impact that arts climate projects can have. And we also run online events. Most of our events happen in person, which might be more difficult for people here to participate in, but we do sometimes run online events as well, which are open and free for anyone to attend. So do keep an eye on our website and social media to see any of those that might be of interest. And yeah, please do keep in touch. I'm interested to hear from people. There's my email on the slide there, and I'm happy to share it afterwards by email or whatever, if that's useful. Very keen to speak to others who are doing this work and learn from the things you're doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Luis. I think we could spend the whole day talking about your organization and what you're doing in Scotland. I find really interesting, and this is something that we do not yet have here in Italy, is the fact that you practically engaged cultural organizations as an active player working with public institutions, municipalities, other sectors in facing climate change, which is something which is a shift that I think would be very important to be done in the future in the crisis we are dealing currently. So thank you very much again. Now we continue our journey. We move from this international good practice to a national one. The idea we have in Fondazione Sant'Agata is that in order to understand what we can do to help cultural organizations, we need firstly to understand what cultural organizations are doing in Italy. That's why we created the observatory called 4C, Cultural and Creative Carbon Cut, in which we studied from a research-based activity the current situation in Italy. We did it using questionnaires, again. That's what we do. I'm a bit of a nerd, data nerd. Today we are not going to present everything, so if you want you can read the reports online. It's very, very interesting. The idea is that if we want to guide the community, if cultural organizations want to guide the community, firstly they need to understand what they have to do inside the organizations from a management point of view. So we decided to map this part. We did it in the last years, and this is something which is ongoing. So we are going to present you some data, and I leave the floor to my colleague Giorgio Anatoli, which is a PhD student on this topic. So, Giorgio.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here with you today to share some of the results of the 4C, Cultural and Creative Carbon Cut research project. Oh, no. That was launched by Fondazione Sant'Agata in 2024 with the support of Banca d'Italia and Fondazione CRT. Since 4C is the first national research project on this topic in Italy, we decided to include 9 different cultural sectors in our target that you can see listed here on the slide, and to provide as broad a picture as possible on the decarbonization process within cultural and creative industries in Italy. To map and analyze the sector, we adopted a 3 steps method. So we first started by analyzing and reviewing national and international studies and projects on this topic, and build on the literature we found and on the experiences we found. We developed a questionnaire on which I'm going to focus in a moment. The first step was to conduct some interviews with 22 cultural organizations in Italy to explore more qualitative aspects and to provide with some best practices and case studies. This is the structure of the questionnaire, long and complex, as you can see. It is structured in 8 sections. The first one aims to gather information about the respondents and some characteristics about the organizations, while section 2 to section 8 focus on 7 different environmental dimensions. We started by investigating internal processes, so we started by understanding which procedures and documents cultural organizations are adopting, are putting in place to manage their activities in a more sustainable way. We then explored external activities. These include how cultural organizations are trying to raise awareness among their communities on climate issues, and also how and if they select their partners and funders based on sustainability criteria. On section 4, we moved to water, energy, and material consumption, and also how organizations are managing the waste they produce. We also had a focus on accommodation and remote working. We wanted to see if cultural organizations in Italy have some sort of guidelines or policies on where the staff should stay when they go for work trips, and also on where guests invited by organizations are hosted, and also how they organize their remote working. Then we moved to food consumption. So we wanted to explore if cultural organizations had put their attention on selecting vegan and or vegetarian options or local food, for example, when organizing events. One important dimension is the one related to transportation of people and materials. So we focus on daily commuting between home and the workplace, but also on medium and high distance work travels, the transportation of artworks and materials, and most importantly, how our audience travel to cultural organizations. And the last section focuses on the land use, so how cultural organizations produce an environmental impact when they organize events outdoors in natural areas. That was an overview of the structure of our research. Moving to the results, the questionnaire reached more than 1,000 cultural organizations across Italy. We included in our sample 700 of them, which is a representative sample of the actual Italian cultural landscape, geographically speaking. As you can see from the region circled in green, there we reached almost or a perfect correspondence of the number of organizations that we have in our research and the actual number of organizations operating in those regions. Instead, for the one circled in red, we had an over or under representation because of how we distributed the questionnaire. So who are the organizations involved in our research? Most of the organizations are small organizations in terms of number of employees. They declare to have fewer than 5 people working there, which these data also respect the actual Italian composition of cultural organizations. They operate in urban central areas and mostly at a regional level. In terms of cultural distribution, distribution, almost 60% of our sample declared to be a museum or a cultural institution, followed by performing art and the sector of cultural events and festivals. Where do we stand today in terms of decarbonization process in Italy? Well, most of the Italian organizations are highly aware of the climate issues and of the role they should play in the climate action. In fact, the average level of awareness stands at 75.5%. And here I'd like to let you notice that almost half of the sample reached high and medium score range. But when translating this into actions, we see that there's not a perfect translations. In fact, the average level of activation stands at 47.7%. This means that this 28 points gap revealed that culture organizations in Italy are aware of climate issues and what they should do about it. However, there are some systematic barriers that they face that prevent them from actual implementation. And we can see it from this graph where just 270 organizations out of the 700 of the sample achieved almost fully achieved or almost fully achieved the decarbonization targets. And these data significantly differ across cultural sectors. In fact, as you can see from the purple bubble up to in the green area, cultural events and festivals are the sector that performs best, probably because cultural organizations within this sector started reflecting on this issue way before than other sectors. And at a policy level, this variety tells us that a one-size-fits-all strategy won't work, and we need to differentiate strategies to support different sectoral contexts. The same variety emerges also for the dimensions and the sub-dimensions I mentioned before. Cultural organizations, Italian cultural organizations, are more active and more aware for what concerns staff incentives to have a sustainable behavior, and also to all the dimension that relates to reduction of the consumptions. A different story is told by other dimensions, for example, the selection of funders and partners based on sustainability criteria, and the presence of a green team, by which we mean a group of the staff exclusively or partially dedicated to develop, plan, and implement sustainability activities. And the most critical dimension regards the transportation one, but we think this reflects the Italian situation on transportation sector. When looking at internal processes, these numbers tell us that formal procedures and resources dedicated to sustainability issues are very limited. Many organizations know what they should do, but they don't have the institutional architecture to support a systematic change. And if we look closer to one of the sub-dimensions, the green team, we see that just 2% of our sample declare to have exclusively personnel dedicated that works on sustainability issues, while 7-8% says there is no one in their team that is working on these issues. So to conclude, there are, despite the systematic barriers, we have in Italy, Italian cultural sector has a good solid foundation to build upon, and that's, we think, that's the picture we get from this research. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giorgia. There's also an interspecies upload, which is always good. I think it was an upload. Thank you. Sorry for the technicalities. We decided to put it there because we think that on one end, in Italy, but also in Europe, there are a lot of organizations which are socially engaged, like the one which are partners of Green Ethics, that are doing a lot. On the other hand, we have organizations that could and have the potential to act with their communities, but they decide or do not have the instruments yet to act. This need to act is not a new responsibility for organizations that are already struggling from the economic sustainability for their position and so on, but we think it's an opportunity considering the world is changing, that the funding procedures are changing. So if organizations want to be healthy from an economic point of view, need to look at how they need to adapt, what they can propose to their communities and so on, to stay on the market, also considering Creative Europe projects and so on. So this is why we wanted to put some data on the table. The research is still ongoing. You can go on our website. We have the questionnaire, which is dedicated to Italian organizations, but if you want to have a look, it could always be useful. We close and end this very small journey of this panel with one case study, which actually came from our research. It is a very small organization, but that is doing great things, considering the need with which we started this conference, which is the need to understand how to change the world using culture. With this responsibility, sorry, Duna, I leave the floor to Duna Viezzoli, which is representing the Bora Museum in Trieste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, everyone. Thanks, Andrea and Fondazione Sant'Agata, for inviting us here today. And thank you, Project Director Alessandra Rossi Castiglione, Alessandro Pontremoli, for the inspiring introduction, because we don't know each other yet, but I think we share something, which is we all want to change the world. And we are trying to understand the practices that lies behind that. So I have a very long presentation that I will try to to show you quite fast, but first more than 15 minutes, well, I'm very lucky today. But first, yes, I want just to share a small reflection about the role of cultural organizations in what we all want to achieve, apparently here today, which is having an impact and driving the change. So we want to raise awareness, we want to change practices, but we really want to make an impact on our audiences, because I think that creating this impact, so strengthening together activism and imagination, which is what a cultural leader needs to do, because social and climate issues and responsibilities are a matter of leadership of the cultural organizations and the cultural sector to work on the collective imaginations, which is indeed in a crisis. So cultural organizations not only have the chance to drive this change, but I think they do have a huge responsibility on doing this. So let's try to launch some seeds of change here together today. And now I'm showing you what we do at the Bora Museum of Trieste. We are on the border from the northern eastern border of Italy. So we try to share this culture of cross-border visions, like WIN does, with no borders at all. So shortly, Bora Museum was a project born for fun, honestly, linking to the historical, anthropological, and ethnographic experience of people from Trieste facing this very famous Bora wind, which can get and hits very strong, especially in winter. And the idea was, okay, let's turn this environmental issue into something creative that we can actually use to stimulate and steer people's imagination. So the idea, the very first idea was creating the Bora box, so that everyone could have her and his own Bora with her. So afterwards, we started with some wind festivals all around the city centers and beyond, and also steered actually a wind tourism. So Bora as an atmospheric phenomenon again, which was not really known other than being a very strong environmental challenge for us, was actually turned into a tourism leverage. Basically, because we developed these touristic flyers, and all of the touristic guides today talk about us, even if we are very small. So we are a micro museum about something invisible, yet very visible, that we can actually see in winter days in Trieste, and not only actually. So in 2020, there's an error there. So it's 2004, so 2004, we opened the Magazzino dei Venti, which is a very small museum in 20 steps that you can visit when you come to Trieste, and it's a bit chaotic, as if the wind came in, but very, very creative. So our idea is to steer people's imagination and creativity through the wind. We have participated collection by Trieste citizens and visitors. Everyone can send their own wind contribution from all over the world. So we receive a lot of contributions, and that's why our collection is increasing every day. A very special one is an original nose wind, so an Etchis in a very small box. And this is actually a way to engage with our audiences, who contribute to the collection. We also have a physical and digital archive about the wind culture, because we talk about Bora wind, but actually about the wind culture, and also collection of Bora memories, so a very inspiring, intangible heritage by elderlies and not only, which we display and share also on our digital platforms. And we're also a micro-publishing house. So we are very local, but internationally quite recognized. So we have a very interesting press review. This one is from The Guardian, for example, but we also have from Mare, which is, again, driving also cultural tourism in the city, and luckily not only cultural tourism, but a very sustainable cultural tourism, thanks to the practices that we share with our public. We also learn national and international researchers and experts that came to Trieste on artistic residencies and research residencies to study the phenomenon, both of the atmospheric atmospheric phenomenon, but also of the museum. So we are strengthening together basically cultural practices, theories, and ecology. And now, since 2025, this one is corrected, the year, we are evolving into an interactive and ecological dimension. So we are turning the narrative of the museum, but also the collection and the knowledge transfer, let's say, into a very interactive and awareness-raising environment, but which is also reflecting on practices. So we do raise awareness, but we also organize leadership courses for cultural organizations for climate action. So at the museum, we try to show the invisible through scientific tools. This is from the Oceanography and Geophysics Scientific Institute of Trieste. You can see Bora there, so that's a way to show the invisible from east-northeast. So you can see how Bora is on Venice Lagoon and all of the Adriatic, having a very important impact in the Adriatic Sea for the biodiversity and so on. But we also show it creatively. So this is a broken umbrella that you can see spread all over the city center when Bora hits in the winters, trying to connect this way both scientific aspects and creativity. And this is a very interesting other example about the Gulf of Trieste when Bora is blowing. So showing something you can't see in a way that is visible. But we also show something that is very visible, which is, of course, climate change. And that's what we are brainstorming a lot now, these days, currently in the last 2-3 years at the museum. So how to turn the narrative from the atmospheric phenomenon description and creative engagement into an awareness-raising tool for climate advocacy. So we are a small museum, and we think that small museums in particular, since they are quite not as a big institution, so they are not burdened by many issues that we know museums, especially in Italy, have. We are lighter, so we can do things easier. And especially we can be places for reflection on the climate crisis and environmental sustainability. So we talk about meteo. In every visit at the museum, we explain this difference between meteo, so what's the weather like in the same place today, and climate, so what's the weather like in the same place for 30 years straight. This is why vento e clima, so wind and climate, are very hot topics at every visit. We sensitize visitors deeply on these topics by looking at images of the past. This is a very famous photo of a very famous photograph in Trieste of people, behaviors, and changes nowadays. So we don't use such tools nowadays. Bora is indeed decreasing as an effect of the climate change as well. And we're seeking the difference of winter Bora days today and in the past. So you can really see a difference in the ice thickness and so on. We show story of the past climate, photographs by Professor Silvio Poli, was a very famous Bora scholar, to reflect on what is changing and how people behaviors are changing today. These are parts of our collections, objects of memory. These are tools to face iced pavings. So Trieste has very steep hills, and in winter days these were very much used, but also creatively used. So this is cheese crepes that were also used for for facing ice and wind. So very shortly, I'm showing you some of the last projects that we've been developing. So narratives on the present and hopefully for the future. This was co-created social book about the climate crisis in the Friuli Venezia Giulia region. So we engaged citizens of the Friuli Venezia Giulia region to tell us about their experiences of the climate change. So we've been collecting examples and evidences of the impacts on people's imaginary and daily experience, somehow to get the phenomenon of climate change closer to people's perspective and perception, not to seeing it as something very far and very difficult to describe, but as something that we can perceive and experience every day. This was first a digital book and then a paper social book called Cambiaventi. Then we have this Che Vento Faceva project, bridging history and science to reflect on the climate, telling stories. If you want to have a look, you have all the details on our webpage and so on. But basically, we've been using historical facts to narrate about the relationship between people in territories and the climate. So this is the mythological figure of the Bora, and then we have this famous battle of Mountain Nanos, where one military group was defeated because of Bora helping them with the narrows on the mountain. So we've been telling narratives to see how the people interacted in the territory. Then we have Altri Tempi, Testimoni del Clima, which was a very interesting citizen science experiment for people to become climate witnesses. So again, by exploring their personal and emotional relation with the issue, so we invited people to send us their memories and climate experiences in the form of postcards. With memories of the past, so in places where sometime was snowing. So in the past there was snowing, now it's not snowing anymore. We cannot go skiing in the same place today anymore, and about the anomalies of the present. Then, in the end, we exhibit the citizens' contribution with a scientific explanation of the phenomenon, linking again citizen and people experiences with scientific explanation to understand what's actually going on. And we exhibited this at the Science Museum Immaginario Scientifico in Trieste. But we also fostered intergenerational exchanges, building bridges in the collective imagination between the children of yesterday, so our elderlies and their Bora memories, with the children of today at one very special library in Melara social housing building complex in Trieste. But we've been also working with European projects with the University of Trieste, in an alliance between 11 universities from all over Europe and beyond as leading stakeholder, because we designed and implemented the first sustainable heritage student competition with students from all over Europe, where we reflected on the role of creative and cultural organizations in dealing with climate change and its impacts. So we steered these groups of students to reflect on what's the role of cultural organizations and how they can actually leverage an impact through their cultural practices and contents. This is also very interesting eco-friendly souvenirs for ready-made Bora boxes to take away from Trieste, and this was part of the Borarium Green project. So this is a way to recycle objects and contents and boxes to bring away the Bora from Trieste. But we also collaborate with the scientific meteorological Adriatic Alpine Society with meteorological stations, and developing courses for weather observer, so for all people to become aware of what's happening. So I'm done. Also with Fai per il Clima. Just showing few more slides, but I can skip these. This is a way just to say that we show also best practices and show experiences from other territories at the museum. So artistic creation, transformative solutions for regenerative actions in different territories. So we also share best practices from all over. Also through data, saying again this link within scientific dissemination and creativity. So just to sum up, Bora Museum as a small museum can describe climate in the past through objects and documents, but also through intangible heritage and people's memories, engaging and creating bridges with different generations, sectors and disciplines through a participatory approach, promote, collect and share best practices both locally and internationally, and be creative spaces for experimentation and social innovation. And this is why we think that we can be open doors on territories and, of course, on local communities. Thank you very much, and as we like really much to say, fair winds to all.
Grazie Duna. Thank you, Duna, sorry.
I think I went out of time.
No. Actually, we are perfectly on time, and this is a very good way to close this very short panel. We hope to have spread some nice seeds. We are here. We will be here for the rest of the morning, so please talk with us. We are here to share. So thank you very much, and I leave again the floor to Alberto. Thank you.
So we can pass. Thank you very much to Fondazione Sant'Agata and to all the speakers. Very interesting experiences. Alessandra Rossiglione for the third section. Pierluigi Sacco. And we have online Marta Jimenez Pumares by European Cultural Commission. Thank you to be here with us.
So we go for the last session before playing the game. And it is a session that in some way I anticipated briefly with my intervention in the beginning. We are now with some keynote speakers reflecting on culture as a crucial resource for Europe development and specifically for Europe ecological transition. So I give the floor to Marta Jimenez Pumares, Policy Officer for Cultural Policy at the European Commission, with expertise in the green transition of the cultural and creative sector, and thanks to be with us.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Very inspiring morning. I will share my screen now. Just confirm, please. You can see it.
Yeah. It's not in the presentation way, but we see it.
Is it now in the presentation?
Not yet.
Because it's in another screen. Okay. Let me put it here.
Yeah.
No. Okay, I take away the notes. Is it better?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll try to be quick also. At the European Commission, as everybody must know now, we have limited competences on culture, but what we try to do, our job consists on creating opportunities, supporting beyond the national support, and also incitating cooperation. For example, through Creative Europe cooperation projects like yours. What I want to talk about today is two elements. The first one would be what are our tools for cultural policy at European level, and then I will have an example of a very recent report on greening the creative sectors that was, released in December. But first, let's go quickly through how cultural policy is done at European level. So we have different documents that mark our work. Some of these documents are documents done to guide the work, like the European Agenda for Culture from 2018, or some EU Council resolutions. But our daily work, it's mainly guided by a document called the Work Plans for Culture. These are 4-year plans that are decided by the member states, And in these plans, there's priorities and there's also actions that the Commission needs to do in these 4 years. So in the different documents and plans, we've seen since 2018 a growing interest and priority for sustainability and the role of culture for sustainability. The latest example would be the current work plan for culture, for which we have prepared this report I'm going to tell you about. We have different tools for these actions, and one of them has a very strange name. It's called the Open Method of Coordination, or OMC. This just means a group of experts from national governments that work on a theme or a priority defined by these work plans for culture. So in this case, the current work plan for culture, as you can see with the arrow, had one of the priorities on artists and cultural professionals, and one of the actions was one of these groups, working groups, on the theme of stimulating the green transition of the cultural and creative sector. I will talk about this report right now, but the latest policy framework that was just released last year, as you can see really below, is the Culture Compass for Europe. This framework will really guide our work with the Commission, with the Council, with the Parliament in the next years. It was important to have one framework for cultural policy. It did not exist. So it's a very important advancement at European level. So very briefly, this Culture Campus for Europe has one strategic vision, Culture for Europe and Europe for Culture. It has 4 key directions, and it also includes 20 specific flagship actions. As an example, very quickly today, these are some of the actions included on culture and sustainability under one of the key directions, Direction 3, Culture and Heritage for Competitiveness, Resilience and Cohesion. So from the 20 flagship actions, these ones specifically focus on the role of culture for sustainability and different actions and projects that can support this dimension. So this is what we will be working on from this year on. Today, I want to focus on this report I mentioned from the current work plan for culture and this working group. What did we have? We had a mandate to work on how we can best support the cultural and creative sector to become more sustainable and green. But also, we thought it was important, and it's been mentioned today a lot, to better understand the role of the arts and the culture to precisely change the minds in citizens, in society, to go from, as it was said just before, from awareness to more action on climate. And for that, we had over 40 experts that came from ministries of culture and environment or climate. So this is one of the very best things we can do at European level. And it's sitting together people from different ministries or different organizations, different angles to work together. For some of the member states, these people were not talking before, and now they are already making these connections. So this is one of the main successes of the report. So as it also has been said today, it's important to build on what has been previously done. So in this case, we were building on 2 previous expert groups or OMC groups. You might have heard of these reports, which were also quite successful. On the first one, for example, strengthening the cultural heritage resilience for climate change, is not only tackling the emergency of climate change affecting heritage, it's also how heritage practices can be recovered that could be very useful today, that have been maybe abandoned, and we should go look back how we can do things differently and more sustainably. And the Stormy Times report has been also quite successful in its recommendations to leverage the transformative power of culture for sustainable development. The report also builds on other European reports that are not from member states. You also might have heard that the Creative Europe program itself has analyzed its impact and how it could be greener as a program, but it also created 3 documents to help the cultural and creative sector greening the practice in culture. And also, a couple of years ago, we had what we call Voices of Culture. It's our structured dialogue with the civil society. So we already had discussed the green transition and the energy crisis of the sector. So the report is out. It's out since mid-December. Creative Shifts, Empowering Culture for Sustainable Living. This report is available in English, and we also have an executive summary in all 24 official EU languages. The first part would be, as we were saying, how can artists inspire to make us reflect about climate change. We have very beautiful examples in the report. But what's maybe more interesting is that the report has selected best practices on the topic. So why selected? It's very important. It was very important for these experts not to create a new catalog of hundreds of pages with everything that's been done everywhere, because they thought it was more important to analyze these practices and to see why are they sustainable, how can they be replicated elsewhere, and what makes a good practice. So, for example, to give you a brief example, if you look at the audiovisual sector, there's carbon calculators at national, regional, local level. So how many carbon calculators can you find in the audiovisual sector? Well, in this way, what we suggest in the report, and it's already being under creation, is to have one European carbon calculator that allows producers in a 3-country co-production, for example, not to have to comply with 3-4 different carbon calculators, but to have similar standards for the productions. We have selected good practices for many sectors, also from theater. Of course, the Theatre Green Book is mentioned. We have examples also from Dacian Santagata, Culture for Climate Scotland, Pro Progressione. Many of the people who are there today are excellent good practices that the experts believed it was important to have in this report. Just to finish, the report has done some recommendations on how to go forward in 3 blocks. The first block would be establishing culture and creativity as keystones of sustainability. This appeals to what has also been mentioned here about the global sustainable development framework. How can culture be more present in global discussions? How can it leverage a sustainable future? And also, as this group and report did, it's important to strengthen the coordination between the culture and the environmental policies. The second block is how to better mobilize the cultural and creative sectors, and at the EU level, but also at national level. So the report proposed to use more the culture and creativity to drive the climate and biodiversity action, and also to promote the role of our artists and creatives in the ecological and climate action. Again, going to action is something that appears very often in this report, from awareness to activation, as it was mentioned. And the third block of recommendations is how to support the green transition at the European and national levels. And in here, maybe one of the most important things that needs to be discussed is to how to provide additional funding for sustainability in the cultural sector, not taking what the low funding that exists for the cultural sector and also had the burden of financing with that money the sustainability. So this appears like a huge priority. That would be very quickly the presentation on the report, and I'm available for questions. Thank you very much.
So thank you. I was thinking to collect also Professor Sacco's contribution and then open up a Q&A, so question and answer, if there is any. So we are very glad, if you agree, it's okay for you? Thank you. So we are very glad and very proud to have Professor Sacco today with us. I think most of you know him. He's a professor of behavioral economics at the University of Chieti Pescara. He is visiting professor at Harvard and was a European Commission consultant and so many other things I cannot add. But I'm really glad, and specifically glad because Professor Sacco is going to give us some thoughts that go deep in understanding why culture and why it is so important at the level of development of Europe and also the ecological development. So I give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. It's a real pleasure to have this opportunity to reflect with you about one topic in particular that I think is crucial in a project like this, which is the role of culture and behavioral change. We are making, of course, we are invoking, I would say, very important motivations in principle about why, of course, behavioral change for climate sustainability is important. But one thing is, of course, advocating the importance of this, and another thing is driving actual changes in perceptions and behaviors that lead people to approach differently this kind of problem. I should say the only thing that I would add to what Alessandra said about what I'm doing, because it's important in this respect, I am the Vice President of the European Capital of Culture in France for 2028, which is Bourges, a city of 70,000 inhabitants in the middle of nothing, literally the so-called void diagonal, which is basically the France inner areas. Why am I mentioning this? Because that will be the most ambitious project to date of radical carbon emission cut. We have a 44,000 tons of limit for CO2 equivalent for the whole program, which means in this case not just the production, but actually the visitors. So how actually the whole event is going to be able to contain carbon emission to a level never attempted before. We even have a emission manager that is entirely devoted to this. I mean, it's a big challenge. We don't know whether or not it will work out, but clearly it's probably, especially in terms of the role of the arts, in this regard, probably the most ambitious attempt, not only Europe, to address this problem. So, I mean, if you're interested in the topic, watch out for 28 and what's going to happen there. And of course, you will probably, if you want to get there, you will probably not go by plane. We are preparing, that's interesting also to know, since it will take time, because of course we will work a lot with the night trains, for example. We work a lot of electric buses, bicycles, just whatever. But since it will take time, we are preparing some special kits of contents for people who are going to visit, but they will have, in some sense, the program starting with the travel and the possibility to download specific content created for the visitors while you go there. So that's also interesting, by the way, and then I finish with this, but that's also interesting because generally what happens is that we are in a place, we take the plane, in 1 hour, 2 hours time at most, we are on the other side of Europe, and I mean, for us, we are on the other side of Europe, but for our mind, that's difficult to realize, which means that sometimes with this, I would say, with this quickness with which we change our environment, it's very difficult to really put yourself in the spirit that you are going to a different place. And so in some sense, we are reviving the idea of pilgrimage, because, you know, pilgrimage is exactly this. You have to take a long way to get there. You prepare psychologically to arrive and to have a sort of epiphany of various type. So in some sense, this could also be a way to reconceive the very logic behind traveling and tourism, which I think if we want to take seriously carbon emission, it's something we should consider. Okay, why focusing on culture when we speak of behavioral change for climate sustainability? The problem that we have with climate sustainability, and I will explain why the conventional approaches that do not use culture very often stumble into very big problems in really being effective in this regard, is that we have what we could technically call a problem of metacognition. It's not true that people who are, for example, climate skeptics are stupid or necessarily, I would say, prejudiced. We have to understand that climate change is one of those phenomena in which literally our cognition is unprepared to understand what happens. Because, look, our way to interact with the environment that has been extremely successful over hundreds of thousands of years has been a situation in which most of the time there was a relatively close loop between your behavior and the result. So you want to, let's say, for example, to hunt a deer, okay, you can do it well, less well. Sometimes you get the deer, sometimes you don't. You understand how to do it. You have a relatively reliable feedback on whether or not your actions make sense. Even when you have social phenomena that are more complicated than hunting a deer, you have, for most of human cultural history, situations in which your society was basically made of a few hundred people. Our own social cognition is completely targeting phenomena that have to do with a few hundred people. For example, the famous Dunbar number, the number of people with whom we can establish real relationships, not Facebook friendships, but real relationships, is at most a few hundred people. Because that's been our reality for 99.9% of human cultural history. So this change of scale, this dramatic change of scale, it's something for which our own cognition as humans is not prepared. We don't have, let's say, experience with this. The scale of the phenomena that emerge when you consider societies of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, in which what happens in a place can have consequences very far away, like it happens for climate, it's something that simply our cognition is not equipped to tackle. This does not mean that our cognition is limited. Simply, we didn't have a chance to develop a cognitive strategy to deal with these problems. So people are confused. As a consequence of this, people, of course, cannot wrap their head around the idea that, for example, let's say, look at what's happening, for example, today. You can have a very, very cold winter but you can have an average world temperature that is rising. For most people, this is okay, but what's this? I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I have a direct experience that does not confirm at all what you're telling me. And in particular, you are speaking about statistics, what happens at the North Pole. What do I know about the North Pole? I have no idea. So the problem is not a problem of bad reasoning, it's a problem of beliefs. What kind of belief I can form in terms of whether or not this thing is happening, who are the reliable sources. For example, if I have experts that tell each other that they are completely misleading in terms of how they reason about this, and they are the experts, what can I do? I mean, it's in this kind of situation, it's very easy that I take a very skeptical stance and I simply say, okay, the experts, but in the end, they are not even agreeing among themselves. I'll try to form my conviction by myself about what I see every day and so on and so forth. So the problem from this point of view is not about convincing people in terms of trying to, let's say, manipulate their capacity for reasoning. And this is exactly the approach that has been followed mostly today. So let's try to reconstruct what is the rationale behind this approach and how our approach from a cultural side takes a completely different stance. So behind this approach of trying to convince people that they are reasoning badly about what happens with the environment, there is a very, very successful psychological theory that has been, I would say, absolutely lionized by the Nobel Prize to Daniel Kahneman, that is the so-called dual process theory, that is based on the idea that human cognition is organized around two different systems, cognitive systems, called System 1 and System 2. So in the very, very successful and famous book called Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman says, okay, we have two systems. System 1 is basically driven by emotion. It's impulsive. People react immediately. And most of the time, this can be, let's say, effective, satisfactory, but the problem is that emotions are driving you astray. They are not really making you use the really deep cognitive resources of reasoning that can only be kicked in if you leave the time for System 2, which is deliberative reasoning, where you really start pondering things and understanding what happens. So the problem, he says, most of the time we have an issue with System 1 that literally overtakes your behavior, leads you to impulsive responses, and these impulsive responses are not well pondered enough. To solve this problem, you can use some techniques of benevolent manipulation. And the most comprehensive approach in this regard is so-called nudging. So nudging is a very, very successful approach, again, led by another Nobel Prize, Richard Thaler, with Cass Sunstein, so two very, very prominent academics that have literally created an enormous wave in public policy in terms of devising very, let's say, the idea of nudging literally is gently pulling you towards something, okay? So not really forcing you to do things, but also creating the conditions so that you spontaneously embrace a certain type of behavior because in some sense you are put in the position to see that this is the good thing to do. Behind the rationale for nudging, there is this idea of literally neutralizing the deleterious impact of System 1 to give space to System 2. So literally appealing to the human capacity for deliberative reasoning to really get convinced that this is the right thing to do. What is wrong with this approach? It sounds so nice. Well, first of all, before telling you what is wrong from a theoretical point of view, let's consider this empirically. Nudging has been an enormously successful program for public policy. There have been governments at the national level that have created nudging units. So this, in some sense, the evidence that we have today is huge in terms of sample size. What emerged from meta-analysis of this evidence, so not simply studies that analyze, but studies that analyze the studies that analyze. So literally making a synthesis, the most comprehensive synthesis we can make of this kind of experience across different countries, across different problems, across different times, and so on. Overall, the effect size of nudging interventions is very small. Not zero overall, I mean, averaging across different studies. Of course, generally high quality studies, the most reliable statistically. The effect size is tiny, but that's not the main concern. The main concern is that the permanence of the effects is very, very weak. So even if people initially embrace this kind of there have been a few cases in which they have been very successful, but they are very little ones, a very limited number, a small fraction of the whole. Most of the time, not only small effect, but people simply flip back to the old behavior after a while. Why? Well, let's now come to the theory. One of the reasons can be that system 1 and system 2 do not exist. Literally. There is no evidence, no neurobiological evidence that there is something like system 1 and system 2. In particular, there is no evidence that emotions are necessarily driving you to impulsive decisions, and cognition is driving you to better ponder decisions. There can be cases in which cognition can be extremely quick and impulsive, and situations in which emotion can be very slow and, in some sense, deliberative. And in particular, what is important is that emotion and cognition are completely intertwined. The reason why the two systems do not exist is that the brain networks that govern emotional and cognitive responses are literally embedded into one another. And interestingly, by the way, we have evidence from the early 20th century, because sometimes, we forget what we already knew, but, sometimes also in science there are fads and fashions, and you forget about things and you embrace other things. At the very beginning of 20th century, there were two physiologists that made a lot of experiments about what was the role of emotional arousal in, let's say, conditioning your cognitive performance for certain tasks. Imagine something like a Rubik's Cube, or let's say a mind puzzle, whatever it is, something that a task that has a clear cognitive content. What they did in their experiments was to manipulate the level of emotional arousal of people during the experimental treatment. And of course, you can do it in various ways. You can, for example, create conditions that make people irritated or enraged, or joyful, or whatever. Interestingly, what they found was that the best level of performance in cognitive terms was always related to a positive and significant level of emotional arousal. It depended on the task, what was the optimal level of emotional arousal, but unquestionably, in every single case, it was never the zero emotional arousal case. But the zero emotional arousal case was still important in the evidence, because most of the time, the zero emotional arousal case was the situation in which the cognitive performance was the worst. So it's exactly the contrary. When you neutralize the role of emotions, not only you do not make better decisions, but your cognitive performance declines. So clearly, if you build your interventions on an idea that you need to neutralize emotional and impulsive response, because that's the only way to convince people to adopt behaviors that make sense, you are literally, in some sense, completely botching the problem, because it's exactly the other way around. So the idea is, okay, why don't we consider a completely different approach in which we do not, in some sense, neutralize, we do not filter emotions, but we embrace emotions to favor behavioral change. Why emotions are important in the first place? I think that if I ask you, I mean whoever, to tell me what is your first memory that comes to mind, I can say pretty safely that in all cases will be a situation in which the level of emotional arousal was not zero. Emotions are important in some sense, not only for this reason, but are important because they are like the yellow marker on your notes. It's literally a signal of salience. This thing is important. So you have an emotional response with respect to things that matter for you. Because if they don't matter, you're not emotional. Very simply. Huh? This, of course, has a huge cognitive impact too, but in particular, if you neutralize the emotional dimension and you want to elicit behavioral change, you are basically saying that you should neutralize the signal that these things matter to convince people to change. I mean, it makes no sense. You have to do exactly the contrary. If you want to create an experience that should be definitional for people to change their behavior, the first thing that you should establish is that it matters. So, big emotional arousal, because otherwise it doesn't work. From this point of view, culture can be extremely effective. Let's try to understand what is the relationship between culture and metacognition. In particular for metacognition, culture has historically an impressive track record. And interestingly, this is related to theater. So it's really, really very close to what we are discussing here also in the context of the project. The most impressive case study from this point of view is related to the emergence of theater festival in the classical Greece of the 5th century before Christ. Because in particular, with the onset of democracy in some of the city-states in Greece in the period. Why? And how this is related to metacognition and then how it is related to behavioral change. Okay, one step at a time. First of all, when you have a polity change from a dictatorship to a democracy, from the cognitive point of view, you have one of the most, I would say, daring challenges that a society can face. Think of how laws are made in a dictatorship, and generally in a theocracy, because the dictator generally has a divine mandate, okay? So these are the laws. The gods basically gave the laws to the tyrant, and the tyrant, of course, implements the mandate of the gods. So if you transgress the law, you get killed, and nobody objects because you were evil, okay? The laws can be whatever if the mandate of the gods, so it's not something you can argue about. But you have a democracy. Well, the process was more complex, but we don't have time to elaborate on this. You have a democracy, and all of a sudden, or more or less, you have to decide which laws you should choose. And you have to decide by deliberation. You have a parliament. Not all citizens are there. For example, women were not there. Lots of other people were not there, but still you had a parliament with a few people that had to make decisions. Should we give the vote to women or not? Should we have, let's say, for example, military conscription or not? In this case, it's not that the gods are telling you what to do. You have to decide on the basis of what you find appropriate, okay? So you have to discuss. But to discuss this, you have to consider not simply what happens now, because the laws will apply in all future circumstances. And you don't know what these circumstances are. So what you have to do is to simulate what could be the future circumstances, okay? This is called counterfactual reasoning. What happens if? From the neurobiological point of view, this is one of the most expensive activities for our brain. It burns a lot of fuel. As a consequence, as humans, we tend to avoid this. Teenagers develop counterfactual reasoning relatively late. For example, children are almost not able to carry out counterfactual reasoning, and for them, everything that can be shown exists. This is the reason why if they see a horror movie, they get terrorized, because if it's on the screen, it must exist. The idea that there can be an hypothetical reality that does not exist, which is the hallmark of counterfactual thinking, it's something that starts to really form into the cognitive system of children at an age that is around 12. So, lots of stuff from this point of view. Okay, so counterfactual thinking is difficult. And this is really about metacognition, because it's not about, okay, what happens now, is this red or blue or whatever it is. No, but what happens if, let's say, a war breaks in 5 years' time and there is a famine at the same time? You really have to consider many different options. How did the Greek society solve this particular problem? Believe it or not, it solved it with theater festivals. Because theater festivals are exactly this. They are a social simulation of possible futures. But interestingly, how did the Greek reason in this circumstance? We are, of course, in some sense, today, in the full swing of, let's say, modern abstract thought. So we reason in terms of counterfactual thinking, in terms of if X happens, what about Y? But that was not the way in which the Greeks, for example, in Athens, reasoned at that time, because causal processes there were impersonated by the gods. So the problem was, if we do this, what about Jupiter? Will he be angry or happy? And what about Juno, if Jupiter is angry, and whatever it is? So literally, for them, counterfactual thinking was reconstructing the psychological reaction of the gods to a specific scenario. But the gods were projections of human psychologies. So the problem was a clear social cognition problem at the meta level. What happens in all possible future scenarios, depending on what I do, in terms of the gods' reactions? But this could be easily translated into very sophisticated forms of counterfactual reasoning. So if I use stories, if I use fiction to simulate a scenario that does not exist, but in a way that entails the relationship between humans and gods, dealing with problems that are not necessarily immediately relevant, but that explore some interesting counterfactual scenarios, I have what it takes. I mean, literally, I train the whole society through these strange hallucinations that we call fiction stories to simulate very complex counterfactual scenarios. And complex they were, and sometimes crazy they were. What happens if I kill my father and marry my mother? Well, it's difficult to go beyond this. No? What happens if all women go on strike? Well. So, this particular strange hallucination strategy that was, theater existed already, of course. But the fact that theater was intertwined into the government of the city to a level that political careers of the most prominent families of the city were decided by their capacity to not simply sponsor, but commission and produce theater festivals, really explains how this I mean, went to a scale that for us today is difficult to appreciate in its full implication. So the point is, we have developed one of the most important cultural phenomena of the West, that were Greek theater festivals, as a very complex social solution to a very challenging metacognition problem, which is exactly, suitably translated, what we are dealing with now with climate change. In some sense, how you deal with democracy if you have no experience of democracy. How you deal with climate change, which means a change at the planetary scale with no experience of change at the planetary scale. I don't want to oversimplify, but you see that there are some correspondences. So in this case, if you have a very complex metacognition problem, you cannot solve it by appealing to your rational thought alone, because the problem is not reasoning well. The problem is going beyond your reasoning capacity, trying to understand what kind of reasoning should be useful when, which is much more complex than simply reasoning well. So, designing specific cultural interventions that tap into our capacity for exploring metacognition alternatives is particularly important. This is one of the reasons why, okay, the arts, culture, good. I mean, we do everything. Of course, if we, let's say, there is a painting just before us, and we see something that is moving, that's interesting. But, you know, we should in particular focus on those kinds of cultural interventions that stimulate this dimension of metacognitive engagement. So it's true that the arts are good, it's true that culture is good, but not everything works in the same way. If we really want to consider seriously the problem of behavioral change, we have to design environments that tap into those specific emotional and cognitive mechanisms that are important to make action salient and, in some sense, change radically the way in which we not simply conceive that situation, but internalize the situation for future use. For example, my university, we are starting to do lots of experiments with LARPs, live action role-playing, which is a sort of hybrid form of theater and gaming. And you can imagine situations, for example, a LARP, in which you have a future post-atomic, let's say, scenario, dystopic scenario in which water is extremely scarce. And your simulated experiences about making tragic choices to survive or letting your beloved ones survive or not in certain circumstances, which are, of course, designed by that specific experience. I've made some experience with this kind of immersive role-playing situations, and I can tell you that once you finish this, every time you open a tap, well, it's different. now this has become salient in a way in which tons of different conferences about the scientific evidence on climate change will never get the same result. So it's extremely important to design these experiences in ways that really, in some sense, mobilize the salience network, that is one specific brain network that is really related to what kind of thoughts, what kind of emotions are reputed to be particularly important in certain circumstances, and also lots of different other, let's say, mechanisms that are generally recruited by cultural intervention. So we have a huge space from this point of view to intervene and be creative in this regard. We don't have the same level of evidence we have for nudging, for the simple reason that nudging has been fashionable for decades, and this is a thing that we are starting now, but the preliminary evidence that we have is extremely encouraging, also because when you go into even the biomolecular level, so just monitoring what happens to the physiology of people when they participate to these experiences. We are doing this kind of study today, taking saliva samples before and after certain types of experiences. You see that the results are incredible. Cultural interventions are akin to certain types of pharmacological interventions in terms of the level of modification that they induce in certain physiological responses. So, but this is not because just a curiosity, but it's because culture and cultural interventions have been with us for thousands and thousands of years. So it's been, our physiology has been co-determined, co-evolved with this kind of rituals, with this kind of, let's say, extremely immersive, extremely arousing kind of social stimuli that have been part of the human cultural history. So the point is, in some senses, let's rediscover the wheel. The wheel was there. Culture has been so important for us for such a long time, but it's been confined into this very stupid box of entertainment. Not because entertainment is bad, but because thinking of culture just as entertainment is stupid, because there are so many other things, and in particular, there are so many dimensions that are important for us as humans that cannot be immediately classified as entertainment, and in particular, there are dimensions that are clearly related to behavioral change. So we need more experimentation, rigorous experimentation, measurement of the effects. This is not because we want to instrumentalize culture. We simply want to understand what happens. Why understanding what happens should be instrumentalized in something, I really can't understand. We are simply realizing the fact that certain things have much more far-reaching effects than we tended to think. What is bad in realizing this? Once we mobilize this, I think that also for the artists, it's extremely more interesting to do something that is not just confined to a few people who write positive reviews about your theater play. If you have a real chance to influence the living of other people, to make waves in terms of how your imagination changes, let's say, social realities, what could be more interesting and even gratifying for an artist than this? So I don't think we are transgressing anything in terms of the statute of artistic integrity if we say this is a moment in which the social impact of the arts is not a luxury, is not an hypothesis. I think it's a necessity not only from the point of view of the arts, but from the point of view of the behavioral science that so far has locked itself in a total dead end, from which, for once, culture can pull them out. And this is news, because generally we have to pray for being considered and praying for getting some relevance, and now we are really seeing an increasing amount of evidence in which culture is the solution from this point of view, where more conventional approaches simply don't work. Thank you very much.
So thank you to Professor Sacco. I think it was an amazing suggestion for us and give us some thoughts and also it made it clear for us who were in the Green Ethics project what happened actually, no? When we worked with communities and people, this connection between emotion and behaviors, no? And cognitive approach. So we are ending this session. I don't know if there are questions. Unfortunately, Ms. Marta Pomares couldn't stay with us longer, so I don't know if I'm getting...
I'm still here. I'm still here.
You are. Sorry, I was so different. So, good surprise.
I have 2 minutes left. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. I got different information. But is there any question or any consideration? If there is any, we go for the ending of the morning. Yeah, please.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
First of all, congratulations, it was an amazing speech. Hello. Congratulations, it was amazing, your speech. I'm Nektarios Yoldas from Technical University of Crete. I liked very much the distinction between System 1 and System 2, which of course you questioned later. And I would like to ask if there are, let's say, surveys studying the effect of social media and the fact that the speed of information that is coming does not leave space to go to system 2. I mean, reasoning and thinking about stuff and just reacting emotionally. Thank you.
System 1 and System 2 do not exist. So that's not the problem. Of course, we have a huge amount of evidence on the cognitive and emotional and affective impacts of social media, and even more now of artificial intelligence. The evidence is very mixed. It's difficult to, let's say, draw general conclusions in this regard. Clearly, let's say, extreme techno-panic positions are probably not well-founded, but also extremely optimistic ones are probably equally not so well-founded. So these are very ambiguous results. So in the case of social media, what we know today, more or less, is that it's not that social media get people into, let's say, mental illnesses, but if you have some susceptibility already, social media can amplify them. So the idea that you can get, let's say, a serious mental health problem because of social media, it's not something that is reflected in the evidence that we have. But if you have, let's say, some subclinical condition that has not been diagnosed, but makes you fragile, and then you are exposed on social media, this can be very, very impactful. That's even worse for AI, because AI is conversational, and what we are seeing today is that, for example, lots of people start using AI as a substitute, for example, for a therapist. And this is a real problem. Because, of course, you really don't have, from this point of view, guardrails. And you can imagine the level of damage that this can make. This compounds with the fact that artificial intelligence, much more than social media, is amplifying cognitive differences. People who are very articulated, that start with a very, very high level, for example, of competence in a certain sector, can really use AI as a superpower. You can have an incredible cognitive amplification. But if you are below a certain threshold, it can literally bomb the level of cognitive articulation that you have. For example, we are seeing this in medical diagnosis. Now there is a massive introduction of AI-based systems in medical diagnosis, and we see that, for example, for people who are, let's say, practicing doctors, that they are starting to build their clinical experience, but they don't have enough clinical experience, and they start to rely massively on AI diagnosis. This is a huge problem, because you don't develop the basic experience that allows you to filter and to use metacognitive evaluation of, let's say, whether or not the suggestions of the AI are grounded. For people who have a serious clinical experience, the possibility of having a much wider set of hypotheses, given a certain clinical case, can be really revealing, because they know which one of those hypotheses make no sense and which ones should be worth considering. So, you know, the balance is it's not black or white. Clearly, however, there are serious social challenges in this regard, but there are also incredibly important possibilities that should be amplified. For example, from the metacognitive point of view, one of the most interesting uses of AI is exactly to help us amplify the social cognition value of stories. I just make an example. Let's consider a fairy tale like Red Riding Hood. Okay, this fairy tale is always told from the point of view of the main character, which is Red Riding Hood. What about the same story told from the point of view of the wolf? What about a story from the point of view of the granny? What happens if Red Riding Hood knows already when she meets the wolf that the wolf ate the granny? What happens, you just start. The really interesting thing of AI is this capacity to amplify, generate different possibilities. And even if stories so far have been extremely powerful in terms of amplifying our social cognition, the very fact of learning that the same story can be told from very, very different angles with very, very different results in terms of what you see and how you interpret the events can be a fantastic social cognition playground to improve critical thinking and probably also to consider in a much less confused way overarching issues like global climate change. This would not be possible without artificial intelligence. So, let's say, fair. Like everything, there is good and bad. Let's try to, of course, tap on the good and be aware of the bad.
Thank you. I'm sure we would stay longer to listen to Professor Sacco's suggestion. There was still a question I don't know if we can get because we are running out of time. So, yeah.
So just to resume for people who don't speak Italian, so the idea is we are increasingly in a situation of passive, let's say, viewers today. So how can we react in a condition in which we are increasingly passive viewers to this kind of narratives that are literally, let's say, painted for us in a certain way? Well, in principle, we are passive viewers, but I'm not really convinced we are increasingly passive viewers because today the technology enables exactly the other thing. You can really create your own content. There is something interesting that just happened. There was an agreement signed a couple months ago, between OpenAI and Disney. And in particular, now OpenAI has the license to feature Disney characters, not only the traditional ones like Mickey Mouse, but let's say Star Wars, the various Disney franchises, into artificial intelligence produced videos with Sora, which is the video platform of OpenAI, okay? Which literally means that everybody can today legally make their own AI movies about Mickey Mouse or whatever it is. Not only, but Disney broadcasts what they consider the most interesting productions on their own channel. So literally, Disney gives up the monopoly of imagination on their own characters. Of course, this is made for business considerations. It's not because they want to democratize culture, quite the opposite. Nevertheless, this shows that there is a clear way in which people can today, let's say, use the new technological affordances in ways that improve their own creative capacity. The problem is not that this is prevented technologically. We have never had such powerful technologies for content production in the hands of everybody. The problem is of a different kind. The problem is that, especially on social media, people are terrorized to post their own creative content because there is an enormous level of violence and aggression, especially teenagers. For example, we made a computational study on TikTok. TikTok is designed for everybody who wants to create videos and post them in seconds, even if you have no previous experience with multimedia production. Only 10% of TikTok users are really posting content on TikTok, and more or less than 2% of people regularly post. Most people simply watch. So TikTok, for most people, is television on steroids. But not because the platform prevents you from doing this, but because it's the social environment that we have created that prevents you from doing this. So it's not true in itself that we are in a situation of increasing passivity. We have never been able to be active as we are today, but there are social conditions that prevent us from doing this, and this is also very much related to how these platforms are designed in the first place, because maximizing engagement, according to the business model from which the platform extract value, is that they want especially passive eyeballs, because that's the best way to profile people, to sell ads and whatever it is. That, by the way, is not different from the television of the 20th century from the business model point of view. So, you know, it's more complex than this. And the real problem becomes, can we create alternative channels in which people can express themselves without this fear of being immediately, let's say, the object of aggression or of insult or whatever it is, because this is what is really, let's say, curbing the creative capacity of people. And if you imagine that today with a prompt you can create a movie, what else could we dream in terms of the possibility of translating our imagination into products? So the problem is not there. The technology is there. The problem is the societal structures that we are creating around these creative processes. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you also to Ms. Pumares and Professor Sacco for being here. And this was the last session, but we have still a moment which is not is 10 minutes. I'm being told 10 minutes to experience a different channel, actually, a live channel that is which was made out of technology, and I'm calling here Nectarius and Alberto Paglialino. It is the game board, which is something that migrated from theater to technology, which is interesting in itself and became a possibility to activate people.
Yes, so we are going to show you just one square because we have few minutes, and thank you very much. I asked for some help to move the screen. Thank you very much. Just to show you a giant version of the board game that. Yes, I'm going to introduce him in 1 minute. Okay, and but before I would like to invite. It's better to start presenting. I already presented the game, but I can present it again. The game. Here you can see a big version of our game table with all the squares. The name of the board game is Spaces for Future, that is inspired by the movement Friday for Futures, of course. And for each square, so as I said, we have different content, trivia, or do you know that? Now I would like to ask to Nectario Gioldatis from University of Crete, Technological University of Crete, that didn't create the board version, but the online version in few minutes, just to tell us how you did. And I remember to all of you that the online version is for free, available to everybody. You can find the QR code of the online version on the photo book, and you can find the QR code of the photo book on the walls. Nectarius, thank you.
Okay. I think nobody cares how we did the platform. What I'm going to stress out the most today is what we call it the platform, because it's actually what you see here, but it's online. But it's not that simple. I mean, it's not just a game. It's an infrastructure that can host games like that. What does this mean for you or the people who work with the communities? It means that they can just clone this game and adapt it to their specific needs. And this is something that makes this system that we have built a platform. For example, you can change the number of squares, you can change the visuals, you can change the contents, you can change actually every aspect of the game to adapt your needs. If you work with elderly people, if you work with young students, you can change everything. And changing the game does not need someone to know how to program. It's just dragging and dropping and editing content. That's all that I want to know about the game. Playing the game on the other side is pretty simple. You just pick the version that fits your needs. You set up a match and play the match. And you can play the match either from one device or from different devices, which gives you the ability to play the game without being in the physical space. That means that a school can play from Italy with Greece. And we have examples with that. Who also created their own version of the game and played the game, and still they are playing the game in the context of another European project. All the schools between Spain, Greece, France, and I don't remember which other countries. I don't want to say more about this, just to know that you can use it the way you like. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nectarius. We are going to the end of on this so inspiring morning. Indeed, we have some little flyer postcard about the online version. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can have it on your smartphone. I ask to Ola to come here just to show you 1 square, 3 minutes game, because we had half an hour, but the morning was so inspiring that we didn't want to stop anybody. And so we need somebody that wants to roll a dice, please. Not everybody, please. Only one person. Somebody roll a dice. I can show. Elena will show you the dice. Thank you very much. Which is your name? Is this?
Okay.
Marcelo, of course. I would like to ask you a warm support to Marcelo, please. That is just yes. Oh, admit 3, 1, 2, 3. Marcelo, please. 6, a big size man. Thank you very much, Marcelo. 6, great. So, squares number 6. Trivia for all the audience. Today you are not divided in teams because we have no time. I'm sorry, but trivia. Thank you, Ola from Rama Theater.
Yes.
Paula.
I will read the content. The question is, what happens if wasps become extinct? A. Entire forests may disappear. B. Bees will multiply. And number C. Nothing special. They are pests that sting and don't make honey.
Okay, we have to decide the answer all together in a democracy way, of course. Just raising your hand. Which is the answer that you choose? What happens if wasps become extinct? Who choose A?
Entire forests may disappear.
A good amount of people. Okay. 1, 2, 3. These people wrote the game. Yes. Okay.
Partners know.
But anyway, but some of them, only some of them. B.
Bees will multiply.
Bees multiply. One. Just to be a testimony, okay?
And C. Nothing special. They are pests that sting and don't make honey.
That is true. Yes. People that hate the wasps. Okay. So the right answer is. Hey!
Bravo!
You lost 1 kilo of CO2. Fantastic. But why? Why this answer? Have you an explanation?
Yes, there is an explanation. Our world is made of ecosystems. In an ecosystem, all species are interconnected. Wasps are also fed on the larvae of certain pest insects that eat the trunks of trees. So, no wasps, lots of pests, insects, larvae, and much less forest.
Thank you, Ola.
Thank you.
Ola Slarzacki, board president of Brahma Theater Poland.
Yes.
An applause.
Ślusarczyk.
It's very difficult for me, sorry.
Ślusarczyk. Yes, no, thank you.
And thanks to all partners of Green Ethics that are here today. Please, I ask you to come here on the stage just to show yourself. Very timid. Come on. We have 30 seconds. Okay, an applause also for them. And thank you to you all for these 3 years and a half of adventure all together. Thank you to stay with us. We are here for 20-30 minutes if you have any answer in an informal context, in informal way. And thank you. Have a nice day. And thank you again to Fondazione Sant'Agata to help us for this moment.